Round 13 here at Grand Prix Sacramento. It's TJ Rogers in the booth with Paul Rietzel, and we have got Mark Jacobson up against Daniel Genova. Now, Mark Jacobson, we were able to see previously with this beautiful green-white deck that came together with multiple Satyr Enchanters, multiple Druidhorns, and on Daniel Genova's side, now this looks like a green-black deck that really came together in that draft.
It's a good version of green-black. He happens to have a very bad matchup against Mark Jacobson's deck because it's kind of a grindy green-black, lots of good creatures, ways to equip them, ways to amplify them with auras, good kind of late-game grind, 2 copies of Vinemare, but his deck does not match up very well against Mark Jacobson's multiple copies of there it is, the Satyr Enchanter, multiple Knightly Valors, and Mark has kind of, I think, the right tools to win this sort of matchup. We'll see if Daniel's able to compete.
So far in this game, we had an Oresco Swiftclaw come down and attack into that Druid of the Cowl, got through for 3 damage. Now it's an Elvish Rejuvenator getting cast off of that Druid of the Cowl. Might put in a land tapped. It's going to be a forest. We also have that Satyr Enchanter on the battlefield for Mark Jacobson alongside the Oresco Swiftclaw. Whenever he casts an enchantment spell, he is going to get to draw a card. It's a 3-mana 2/2 at its base, and it is looking down the 1/1 Elvish Rejuvenator now.
Right, and we mentioned Mark Jacobson picked up a copy of Oakenform, a copy of Knight's Pledge, 2 copies of Knightly Valor, and then also a Hieromancer's Cage. So, he should, oh my gosh.
Double Satyr Enchanter coming down. We saw an attack in for 2. This 2/2 Enchanter just going right past the Rejuvenator, which would have to chump block. And now every single enchantment that gets cast is going to bring about 2 cards into hand. It is positive cards just to cast a spell.
Yeah, and so Daniel really wants to have access to his 1 copy of Strangling Spores right about now, because otherwise things are about to get completely out of control.
And is that about the depth of the removal that we're really looking at?
Yeah, he really just has access to that 1 Strangling Spores to deal with a creature from Mark's side. So, the Poison Tip Archer is a nice counterplay, but it doesn't stop Mark's main plan. He's going to be able to just absolutely rip through his deck.
Yeah, we saw that Poison Tip Archer come down to the battlefield, reach and Death Touch, but it's going to go away to this Hieromancer's Cage now, no longer relevant. That is going to draw 2 cards. So for 4 mana, exile the Poison Tip Archer, draw a couple of cards, play down a Plains, and get aggressive once more with these 2/2s against the 1/1 Elvish Rejuvenator. Daniel Genova is solidly on the back foot.
Yeah, big problems here if you're Daniel. It doesn't look like it right now on the board, but that Poison Tip Archer is currently underneath the Hieromancer's Cage. Hieromancer's Cage is strong enough as it is. It doesn't need 2 cards for it to be good.
There's the Demon of Catastrophes coming down. It is a 6/6 flying trample, sacrificing that Elvish Rejuvenator as an additional cost to cast it. That's going to be a big creature to get in the way. It is very sizable.
Yeah, it's a strong card, but it's, with Daniel's already down to 11 and really on the back foot here. So it's basically acting like a gigantic oversized wall, and it's going to give Mark a lot of time to continue. Oh my god.
The Plummet takes it down, so Plummet made its way to the main deck, and we attack in at this Druid of the Cowl, offering the trade with this Oresco Swiftclaw because we were struggling a little bit with land on Daniel's side.
I think this is the most lopsided game that we've seen so far in this tournament in which both players had reasonable draws. Like, Mark's cards are just so good that Daniel hasn't done anything wrong. There hasn't been any missteps. It's not like he drafted his deck poorly or made any mistakes. It's just none of his cards do anything against what Mark is able to do.
It's going to be a Skeleton Archer coming down. It deals 1 damage to the Oresco Swiftclaw. It's going to be a Doom Dissenter coming down. Now it's a 2/3 Vigilance, a 2/2, a 2/2. Any of these enchantments are going to draw 2 cards. And Mark is just needs the final way to punch through some damage.
Yeah, and it looks like Mark may be out of auras, so a possible momentary reprieve for Daniel, who's at 6 life. So Daniel's going to at least get an untap step, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, Druid of the Horns coming down. That's going to be another reward for some of those auras. We've got a Druid of the Cowl as well, which is going to help produce any mana, but that's not really an issue right now. I guess when you're going to be drawing 2 cards, if you draw the right ones, maybe having that access to mana is pretty nice.
Right, you have to imagine that any one of the 4 auras that Mark has remaining in his deck basically, ends the game on the spot right now. So Daniel, already on the back foot, being at 6 against 20, needs to try to find a way to start pressuring Mark's life total before Mark draws one of those while not dying at the same time. So really tough spot for Daniel.
Colossal Dreadmaw comes down to the battlefield. That is a 6/6 trample, and we're going to see Just the Daybreak come down. It's a 1-3. It's got some lifelink on it, but Mark Jacobson, for the moment, is being held at bay. This field of 2-2s and 2-3s, while powerful, just can't punch through enough damage against the 4 creatures on Daniel Genova's side.
Yeah, and Daniel with 2 copies of Oakenform in his deck that he could put on that Colossal Dreadmaw to make a threat. Go to the air with the Skymarch Bloodletter, which is kind of interesting.
Looks like it is going to be Macabre Waltz getting back the Demon of Catastrophes as well as the Elvish Rejuvenator. Going to have to discard the Rejuvenator, and that Skymarch Bloodletter is now a flying 2-2 that is standing in the way. And Mark Jacobson looks like there's the Oakenform. Oakenform coming down. This is going to make a 3-3 and draw 2 cards. That Druid of Horns is now a 5-6. Wow.
Yeah, that's good clean living right there. So make a 3-3, make my creature into a 5-6, draw 2 cards.
That's not a bad 3-mana investment.
Yeah, and so, now Daniel, who had hoped to kind of turn the corner and go to the air with flyers, now is looking at a fairly wide board and, has to be worried about some sort of an alpha strike here from Mark.
Oakenform for Daniel Genova, though, as alongside that Demon of Catastrophes. So there it is. We're going to lose the Doom to center. That is going to give us a zombie, and I think the final card in hand is an Oakenform because that Druid of the Cowl can have the 3 mana to produce that.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 possible attackers from Mark Jacobson. Daniel's trying to think, can I start to get on the offensive here with this Skymarch Bloodletter and start chipping in for 2 damage? Eventually he does have to attack. Obviously the longer the game goes, the worse it gets for him against those 2 active Satyr Enchanters. But obviously you don't want to just die to a massive attack from Mark. So tough spot here for Daniel.
Yeah, it's hiding a little bit off screen, but up at the top, that's a Militia Bugler on Mark Jacobson's side of the battlefield. It's a 2-3 for Vigilance at this point. And just underneath the life total of Daniel, that is a Skymarch Bloodletter, a flying 2-2. And it looks like we might be going for the Elvish Rejuvenator.
Okay.
So we're going to be trying to get another mana out. This just helps gum up the board a little bit as well. You tap down the Druid of the Cowl, you create the Rejuvenator. Same number of blockers.
Right. And right now, as it stands, Daniel is not dead to an Alpha Strike. The most that Mark could get through on an Alpha Strike is 4 damage. So it doesn't look like Mark has a particularly profitable Alpha Strike, but obviously there's a lot of cards that Mark could have here. Something like Knightly Valor, Knight's Pledge, that would make an attack look pretty attractive. Yeah,
for Daniel Genova, it's a rough spot to be in. Mark Jacobson's going to untap. Last turn, he was able to draw 3 cards. His draw step plus those 2 Satyr Enchanters. We saw that Thornhide Wolves come down to the battlefield, and now it's what else can he do with what has actually found its way into his hand. It looks like it is going to be Goreclaw coming down, and it's going to be another Druid of Horns. Now, that Goreclaw is going to be, it's going to reduce the cost of a couple of creatures in the deck, but otherwise, when it attacks, giving all of these creatures trample, or I guess not all of these creatures, but a good amount of these creatures. It's each one with power 4 or greater. That would be the Thornhide Wolves. That would be that Druid of Horns that has got the Oakenform on it. That does mean that it'll be a lot more difficult to line up some nice blocks on Daniel's side.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously we're going to see an Alpha Strike here from Mark, and I'm fairly certain he has lethal, but I just haven't done the math yet.
Vinemare comes down to the battlefield after an Oakenform on a Demon of Catastrophe swings in with a 9-9.
Yeah, it's close. I mean, Daniel's certainly making a game of it here. Mark has gone a couple turns without, drawing anything too good, so...
Mark Jacobson, he needs to make something happen because that is a lot of flying damage in the air, and there are no options against that flying currently. This Demon of Catastrophes does have flying, does have trample. It doesn't take a whole lot for this card to just go completely over the top.
Yeah, and impressive here from Daniel, right? We with how much we've been kind of commenting on how good Mark's deck is, it's easy to forget that Daniel's done a good job of kind of gumming the board up, not letting Mark get in, and then realize the right moment to kind of turn the corner, stick that Oakenform on a 6-6, and just try to get Mark dead. And so, Daniel's put himself in a position where if Mark isn't able to either gain some life or kill him or commit more to the board right here, Daniel could steal this game, which is incredible. I mean, we called it the most lopsided game that we've seen in this format where both players were able to compete, and Daniel has a shot to steal it.
10 creatures on Mark's side, 7 creatures on Daniel's.
So, right, 3 creatures are going to get through. That's 1, 1, and 2 power. So that's 4 that's coming through for sure. And then he's going to have 1, 2, 3 creatures that are going to end up trampling. So that's 6 power trampler, 5 power trampler, 5 power trampler. It looks to me like a lethal attack again, but the math is something that Mark is going to have to do exactly here.
And Mark Jacobson, I think, lining up what he perceives to be the best blocks that Daniel is likely to make,
Yep.
I imagine.
Yes, correct.
So lining up the cards that will not be getting that trample, and about what cards are going to get in the way. Druid of the Cal and Elvish Rejuvenator and that Scavenged Bloodletter, just trying to get in the way, and then really lining up what could happen on these larger creatures that will gain trample.
And Goreclaw is the key here, right? Goreclaw's triggered ability is what we might see come into action during this next combat step. For those of you who have not played a lot, with Magic 2019, Goreclaw is the kind of card that we've seen people take very, very highly and value it very highly in these sorts of, beefy green decks. And so Mark is trying to figure out, after Goreclaw's triggered ability, what kind of blocks can Daniel do to prevent the most amount of trample damage. Goreclaw is going to give all of Mark's creatures with power 4 or greater +1/+1 in trample. Oh, wow.
Rabid Bite. So that Rabid Bite is going to come down, and it is going to eliminate the Skeleton Archer. So now this 3/3 is off the battlefield, and that other card in hand is a Starcrowned Stag.
Yeah, I mean, if it was close to lethal before, I have to I have to think that it is lethal now. But, I'm pretty certain this is enough damage. But again,
we've done the math. We've checked it out. And Mark Jacobson says it's time to turn it sideways. Now the math is on Daniel's side. He needs to figure out a way to survive this onslaught. There is a 3/3, a 2/3, a 2 2/2s, a 2/3 with Vigilance, a 1/3 with Lifelink, a 1/3 without Lifelink, and then 2 of these 4-power creatures that are actually going up to being 5-power creatures with Trample. Right. So we've got 5, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16. Oh, my goodness. This is well over 20.
Yeah, I think it's too much. If you ever watch The Price is Right, there's that pricing game where you have to try to guess, and eventually when you think that they've reached the price too much, you say, that's too much, and you stop them right there.
Yeah.
I think in this case, that's too much damage.
Trying to line up. Remember that these creatures with power 4 or greater are going to have trample, so that Vinemare, while it is going to stop the Goreclaw, some of that damage is going to cross over to Daniel.
Right, that's 4 points of trample right there, right, on the Druid block and the Vinemare block. So 4 points of trample coming through, plus it looks like at least 3 more from unblocked creatures, right? So well more than the 7 that Mark needs.
Yep. Remember, that Bugler is attacking as well. It just has Vigilance, which is why we don't see that one sideways. So when you are doing that math in your head, be sure to include that 2/3.
Yeah, Daniel's only kind of out here, his way to win this game, which I think is no longer an out, would be for Mark to forget that Goreclaw also gives those creatures trample, basically. So I don't think Mark is going to forget, but he's making blocks that would allow him to survive if Goreclaw did not give trample.
And we have seen this rules interaction a little bit today or this weekend,
yes,
where players have chosen to over-assign damage to a creature for one strategic purpose or another. But this is not one of those times.
Yeah, important to be explicit when you do assign trample damage.
So I think we're counting it up. That is 6 that has not been blocked as of yet, and that is not including the fact that this Thornhide Wolves and this Goreclaw both have trample over what is currently on the board, in addition to that +1/+1. This is going to be a rough spot, and I think Dan Genova just trying to line up, is there any other way that I can configure these blocks? Because it is either I'm dead or I find some way out that Mark didn't see.
Yeah, and I'm not seeing better blocks than he's currently lining up.
That's going to be a rough one.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, you got to feel for Daniel here, who did everything he could to get himself back into this game.
And that is going to be picking it up. We've accepted the defeat. Demon of Catastrophes, the flying 9/9, not able to get it done. That Rabid Bite able to come down and really just change that math just enough.
Yep. Yeah, and again, I was very close as to whether or not that Daniel was dead there before the Rabid Bite. I was quite certain after the Rabid Bite that he had enough, but close game, good fight from Daniel, but Mark's deck really showing how powerful it is.
Yep, Druid of the Cowl just going to come down on turn 2, then get aggressive, and we see a Satyr Enchanter come down on turn 3. We saw this last game as well. Depending on what enchantments are going to be in Mark's hand, this is going to be a really good way to accelerate into the game.
Yeah, and Satyr Enchanter, not the kind of card that you want to draw really late in the game, so it's nice to get it out early.
Daniel learned his lesson.
Yeah.
Strangling Spores wasting no time in eliminating this Satyr Enchanter, and it's the other one that comes down. Oh no, both times the two of them were floating right around the top of the library, and this one coming down, and while one Satyr Enchanter is gone, it is going to be difficult to answer this other 4 lands for Daniel Genova.
Well, yeah, this is okay, though. Daniel's in a little bit better shape. A Satyr Enchanter that draws Mark 1 or 2 or even 3 extra cards over the course of the game, it's a huge advantage, but it's not the end of the game.
Yep.
It's that those Satyr Enchanters were drawing him, 2 cards for every single enchantment, which was just an advantage that allowed him to go way too wide.
Yep. Also notably, he is running light on these land drops, so he actually goes for a Knight's Pledge onto the Satyr Enchanter. This is going to turn it into a 4/4. And now we are able to put down Colossal Majesty. Mark is ready to start drawing some extra cards. We saw him consider. He draws a card off of just casting it. And now at the beginning of the upkeep, if this Satyr Enchanter is still around, Mark Jacobson has just kind of accrued a one-sided Howling Mine.
Yeah, and I take back what I said about this not being a bad start for Daniel. He's now in a great deal of trouble. He just doesn't have the tools in his pile of cards to deal with this kind of situation. He doesn't have, things like Lich's Caress. He does have access to 1 copy of Naturalize, which could at least, deal, with one of the problems. But, Mark's just going to be drawing at least 2 cards a turn right now, and again, this is a cascading advantage type engine here where Mark's going to just pull further and further ahead. And so he wants to make sure that Daniel just can't kill him out of nowhere with something like, a large demon equipped with Oaken Form or something like that.
Right, and we do see that Vine Mare come down to the battlefield as well. It's the 5/3 with Hexproof. No trample, anything inherent like that, so it can be blocked relatively simply. We've also got a Vampire Neonate on the battlefield. Anytime that Daniel's got some extra mana floating around, can just use that to drain 1 point at a time.
Mm-hmm.
That Colossal Majesty, though, turns out pretty nice. It's going to be Goreclaw coming down as well. That's going to be 2 of these creatures with power 4 or greater. So that Colossal Majesty, a little bit more assurance that there's going to be 2 cards each turn. Mark Jacobson's going to have a pretty hard time falling behind. Yeah,
and we're going to enter into an interesting combat step here, right? I mean, Daniel needs to press the advantage and would love the opportunity to trade his Vine Mare for either of Mark's creatures. Wow, interesting. So that's surprising to me.
Epicure of Blood coming down to the battlefield, that it does offer a game plan for Daniel Genova outside of combat with these creatures. And with this Poison Tip Archer on the side of the battlefield, it's holding back Mark right now. Every time that you gain a life, each opponent loses a life. This Vampire Neonate has an ability in which it has each opponent lose a life and you gain a life, which means that for each activation, Mark Jacobson will actually lose 2 life. Oaken Form comes down onto Goreclaw. That is going to turn it into a 7-power creature that when it attacks, they'll all be gaining trample. They'll all be getting +1/+1 as well.
Yeah, and now, again, Mark just continuing to draw multiple cards a turn, continue to kind of use that deck velocity to just churn through his deck to make gigantic monsters that Daniel has a lot of trouble dealing with. I mentioned I was surprised that Daniel elected not to attack with his Vine Mare. I think that the longer the game goes, the worse it gets for Daniel, and I think he would prefer to get this thing over with as quickly as possible. But now, Mark is just building out this wide and difficult board.
And I do want to mention that Thornhide Wolves came down, and he did only tap 3 lands for it. That is actually because of another ability of that Goreclaw, Terror of Calcima. It says that creatures that you own, or when you cast with power 4 or greater, they actually cost 2 generic mana less to cast. To cast.
Certainly another really powerful ability. I mean, obviously, it's the Goreclaw is a solid Colossal Dreadmaw enabler, but Mark drawing so many cards, being able to play multiple spells in a turn, to just throw these Thornhide Wolves onto the battlefield, really powerful as well. So,
and with 2 cards each turn, last game we saw that Poison Tip Archer answered by a Hieromancer's Cage. There's only so long that you can wait through that many extra draws.
Yeah.
So it is going to be 1 damage coming in from the Skeleton Archer. It's a 3/3 joining the 5/3, the 2/3 with Death Touch and Reach.
white-green's not supposed to be able to draw this many cards, right? Isn't that the rules? Like, isn't that a blue-black type of thing to draw this many cards? Mark's sitting here drawing 2 cards a turn, you know what I mean? Then he's got the Satyr Enchanter out, drawing more cards with that, using Gore Claw to cast things. This is not, it's not what green-white's supposed to be able to do.
Mark Jacobson's playing a little bit of unfair fair magic.
Yeah, that shouldn't be allowed. There should be some sort of regulation or writ or something like that.
There's just a rule that says if you're green-white, even if it says that you would draw this many cards, hold off a little bit.
Right.
You know, have some mercy. So we're going to see a Knightly Valor coming down this Thornhide Wolves. It's going to give it +2/+2 and Vigilance, bringing it up to being a 6/7. Also taking a Knight along with it. The biggest issue right now is that Mark Jacobson still has to wait for an answer to this Poison Tip Archer. It's still got reach. It's still got Death Touch, though Mark Jacobson has very much spread his damage wide right now.
Right, yeah. Mark is basically waiting for essentially either a Rabid Bite or a Hieromancer's Cage. Either one of those to kill the Poison Tip Archers is going to lead to a gigantic attack from Mark that might kill Daniel in one swing.
Yeah, because that Terror of Chalcedon Goreclaw is going to give each of these creatures power 4 or greater, that +1/+1, and that trample. Well, there's the Goreclaw itself. There's the Satyr Enchanter that has the Knight's Pledge on it. There's the Thornhide Wolves with a Knightly Valor on it. There's also this Pegasus Courser that will give one of them flying. There's a Colossal Dreadmaw now on the battlefield. Daniel's doing his best to hold this at bay, and he has got quite a lot of power and toughness facing it down.
Yeah, Mark already threatening 20 points of trample damage on the board before you talk about the Pegasus Courser giving something flying.
Another 2 cards for the turn, and I think that might be another Pegasus Courser that's going to be able to come down.
Yeah, again, the reach of the Poison Tip Archer is really the one thing keeping Daniel alive in this game, and so that's really, wow.
It's going to be a Knightly Valor on the Knight, really ensuring that it is going to keep up its prestigious title.
Yeah.
Another Knight joining the battlefield, made a friend.
Yeah, and so, if you're Mark right now, you're thinking, okay, easy mode of this game is I draw the Hieromancer's Cage or the Rabid Bite, and I can kill this Poison Tip Archer. What happens if those are, worst case scenario, the bottom 2 cards in my deck? How do I make sure I win the game even in that situation? He may need to think about, okay, is there an attack that I can make even without removing the Poison Tip Archer that's profitable for me?
And with this many creatures out on the battlefield, it starts to become this question of just how much toughness is on the other side of the battlefield, how much even in an Alpha Strike, I might lose a couple of these creatures, but can I turn it into a profitable way to go? Mark has been drawing so many extra cards that it's hard to even think that, if you get into 1-for-1 territory, Mark doesn't come ahead in that.
Right, it looks like, let's see, 7, 11, 15, 19, 21 plus 4, 25 points of trample damage that he has available right now, which is not, Daniel could still block here.
There's the Rabid Bite. So the Rabid Bite is going to take down the Poison Tip Archer. That Death Touch has now gone. That has been holding a lot of power at bay, and because it is not a fight, it is just the damage one-sided. That Death Touch does not come back to Mark's creature, and now we are seeing an attack in with flying on this Goreclaw, which is coming in for a total of 8-9 damage because that Pegasus Courser and then the Goreclaw giving that +1/+1.
Right, and so, Mark setting up, obviously, a potential lethal attack next turn. He's going to want to be thinking about something like Root Snare. Root Snare is one of the cards that could cause him to lose kind of an unlosable game, so he's going to want to be very, very careful about, over-attacking some sort of crazy Alpha Strike.
Macabre Waltz getting back. The Poison Tip Archer needs to discard a card, needs to cast it. Is there another Swamp, though?
Does not look like it.
I don't think we have another Swamp. So we get back the Poison Tip Archer, but with no way to cast it, it needs to... Daniel needs to survive this turn, and then at least there will be that reprieve back on the battlefield.
Yeah, I think that Mark has the ability to create a lethal attack this turn. And still play around the potential of Root Snare. So I think that we're going to see Mark attack with many, but not all of his creatures this turn.
Hieromancer's Cage also coming down to the battlefield once more. This is going to draw a card because of the Satyr Enchanter. That's going to eliminate the Colossal Dreadmaw. So that's 6/6, no longer on the battlefield, and suddenly that overall toughness on Daniel's side takes a steep dive.
Yeah, and honestly, Mark has enough vigilance on the table. He could just attack with everything.
True, these Knightly Valors, they give vigilance. Those Knights have vigilance too, so those are going to get into this fray. Goreclaw attacking in, the Thornhide Wolves attacking in, the Knight attacking in, the Satyr Enchanter attacking in, the Pegasus Courser joining the fray. Daniel, I just don't think that this ends well for him.
This is 700 or 800 damage, if I'm doing the math correctly. So I think that's going to be enough.
Roughly.
Yeah.
Roughly. Let's not forget the Vampire Neonate. Daniel's one higher. He's functionally at 11.
Right.
That might help out a little bit. Mark Jacobson at 15 because of the epic
damage. Yeah.
Wow. So I think just like last game, we're seeing Daniel Genova just try to envision a situation in which he wins. I think if there was a root snare in hand or out of the sideboard, we would have seen that at this point. I don't think we would have taken this time to consider. Is this the time for it? This was the time.
Unfortunately, these matches, right? We're in that stage of the tournament, where this is going to eliminate Daniel from top 8 contention. Mark will have, to have a potential win it in next round. Certainly, if he wins his next 2, he'll be in the top 8. Great run for Daniel, and still a lot to play for, obviously, in terms of cash and pro points in his last 2 rounds.
Yeah, still, assuming that what we think is going to happen does. Daniel Genova still 10-3, still at a very impressive record heading into the final 2 rounds of this draft.
Very much so. Yep.
And Mark Jacobson, I mean, this deck, you said it when he was drafting it. This looks just superb for the green-white archetype.
Yeah, it's as good of a version as I've seen of it. The draft just really broke well for it. He set himself up for success, set himself up for ceiling, and then he hit that ceiling through a combination of the packs breaking well and then people passing him things.
Yeah, and we do have 2 mana. It is going to be naturalized, so that's what we've been considering. The Oaken form on that Goreclaw is going to go away, and now there might be some play to be had. We're going to go up to 11, throwing a block on that Vine Mare, and I'm a bit perplexed. Did we activate the Vampire Neonate before blocking?
No, I think he blocked already.
Oh, okay. So we've already lined up those blocks as they sit. And now just seeing how much damage is actually going to be getting across.
I think that reduces it to 600 damage.
I mean, there is still the trample by and large. And, all right, it's going to be Mighty Leap as well. Let's get a little bit extra damage on the Pegasus Courser. Sure.
Yeah, it's back up to 700 damage.
I mean, remember that there is that +1/+1 and trample to each of those cards. That is going to be enough. Mark Jacobson, a very clean 2-0 win over Daniel Genova. That green-white deck looked unstoppable in both of those games. Turn 3 Satyr Enchanter, turn 4 Satyr Enchanter.
Yeah, he had a sweat in game 1 for a moment. Came out really, really strong. We talked about it being one of the more lopsided games, and there was a 1-turn window where he had to win the game. Basically could have had any relevant card in his deck to do so. He had it and was able to win. He did have to sweat it out. Game 2, much less dramatic. Obviously, his deck just kind of did exactly what he wanted it to do. The synergies all came together. And as long as Mark can continue to kind of draw his lands and spells and not run into a deck that has a tremendous amount of bounce in the form of Exclusion Mage and Totally Lost, he should be fine. All
right, well, Paul, the viewers have got an idea of it. I've got an idea of it, but I want to hear from you. What is the card of the round?
Oh, it has to be the Satyr Enchanter. I mean, we just saw Mark get the Satyr Enchanter, 2 of them in both of the games, and then just draw basically his entire deck. And so that meant that if he needed removal in the form of Cage or Rabid Bite, he could find that. If he wanted to go wide in terms of just actually, saturating the battlefield with big creatures, he could do that. The Satyr Enchanter, there were other cards that were relevant, but really they were fungible. The Satyr Enchanter was the irreplaceable part of his game plan, since that's the thing that kind of fueled everything else. And I think we saw it really, work to full efficiency in Mark's deck.
Yeah, and that Goreclaw was no slouch either, but absolutely the Satyr Enchanter was just such a star of the show. Even in the second game, wasted no time in casting that Strangling Spores. We saw respect from both sides of the battlefield of what that card was capable of.
Yeah, and in the draft, I mean, Mark loved the Satyr Enchanter. He wanted to start Boros, right? He began his draft with Heroic Reinforcements and thinking, I'm gonna abandon my Goreclaw, I'm gonna go into Boros. But when he saw first and the second Satyr Enchanter, the wheel started turning. He knew the direction he wanted to go.
Yep, and that's one of the games that we have had available for you. Of course, there is going to be more Magic available. TJ Rogers and Paul Rietzel will be back in just a moment. We're back here in Grand Prix Sacramento. Paul Rizzo alongside myself, TJ Rogers, and we are going to be heading into another match of round 13. It is going to be Sam Black up against John Walski. We were able to see Sam Black's draft recently, ended up with this blue-black deck. And tell me a little bit about what he's going to be facing in John Walski. Looks like it's a green-white strategy so far.
Yeah, it's actually a blue-white strategy, just touching green, and it's kind of the nightmare matchup for Sam's deck. Sam has sort of a mono-blue, lots of bounce, lots of counter magic, lots of card draw, and what he does not want to face is basically a white aggressive deck. So lots of low to the ground, lots of cheap creatures, and that's kind of exactly what John's deck is.
Yep, we see a really quick revitalize from John, who draws a card off of it, gains some life, puts down the third mana, and just kicks it back to Sam Black, who is going to be I'm not certain if I actually see the third land here, and I think we have the Arcane Encyclopedia in hand. It's going to be discarding the Vampire Neonate and passing it back to John Walski. A rough start so far. 4 mana, and it is going to be a Snapping Drake hitting the battlefield.
Yep, good start for John. Obviously didn't have one of his 2 or 3 drops, but getting first onto the battlefield, obviously Sam with no third land, so John in great shape early.
And we see one of those disperses come down against the Snapping Drake, buying a little bit of time, but now it's for a 5-mana play. The Gearsmith Guardian coming down. It's a 3/5 right now. If there's a blue creature under John's control, it will be a 5/5. I like this sequencing.
Yeah, and pretty frustrating for Sam. He has multiple copies of Cancel in his hand, so if you were able to have drawn land smoothly, he could have pretty well put a stop to John's slightly slow and clunky draw, but instead, John off to a great start.
Omen Speaker comes down, and it is going to be a cancel, eliminating that one, keeping a blue creature off the battlefield, which makes this Guardian continue to be a 3/5. The Snapping Drake that Sam knows of costs 4 mana. It's not going to be that, which comes down this turn. It's going to be Mirror Image, copying the Gearsmith Guardian, still a 3/5. It does not gain the blue color because it's that Mirror Image. It will still be an artifact.
Yep, but, obviously John pretty happy to have 2 major threats on the board against a land-light opponent, and Sam's deck, being very, very heavy blue, not that great at just dealing with creatures on the board. He has to basically return them to John's hand and then counter them. So
we're going to pass the turn to John, who is sitting with 2 of these 3/5s. It takes only 1 blue creature making it down to the battlefield to make this a devastating swing in for 10.
Right, and Sam knows about the Snapping Drake in John's hand, so he's going to sit back on cancel rather than start to develop his board.
And that is the cancel, eliminating that Snapping Drake. It's going to be the attack in for 6. Still a very sizable chunk. Sam Black falling down to 11 heading into his turn.
Yeah, and just another turn where it would have been absolutely fantastic if Sam had drawn a land, because he could have started doing 2 things in one turn. As it is, he's just so far behind in this game.
Yep, there's an Aviation Pioneer in hand. Is a Skeleton Archer as well, likely dealing 1 damage to John Walski. That's not going to be too impactful. Disperse returns that one to hand. And now Sam Black tapped out. And currently at 11, 1 blue creature, and Sam Black, he'll find himself at 1 life, but that is not going to be the case. 6 damage comes in, down to 5. And followed up by a Hungering Hydra. That is going to be a very quick win. He's going to pick up the cards. John Walski on the draw, and it's a Gearsmith Prodigy coming down early for Sam Black. That's the 1/2. That could become a 2/2 with an artifact on the battlefield.
Interesting, yeah. And so the Gearsmith Prodigies were not cards that Sam chose to main deck. I think he saw that John had sort of a slow and clunky Bant deck in game 1, so he said, let me try to get a little bit aggressive here and try to shift the paradigm and give myself a better chance to win game 2.
Could go with that Skyscanner as the turn 2 play. It would allow him to attack 4/2, but that would mean not holding up the cancel, which is in hand. Essence Scatter is going to beat that, denying Sam the draw of a card as well as the extra point of damage. John goes down to 18.
Yeah, you saw Sam think about it, right? He definitely had a feeling that John might have something like Essence Scatter there. Obviously, he would love to have resolved this Skyscanner and get his game plan deployed, but instead, John with a kind of the perfect countermeasure of a 2-drop counterspell into his own 3-drop.
And it's going to be Pegasus Courser coming down the 1/3, a fine blocker against this Gearsmith Prodigy, but Exclusion Mage is going to return that to John's hand. Sam off to a better start, all things considered, though does not deploy his 4th land.
Yeah, and his blue, mostly blue, slightly black deck is just not that well equipped to deal chunk bits of damage. So he's plinking in for one here, one there, but realistically, is that the way that he's going to be able to deal 17 more damage this way? It doesn't seem very likely. So he needs to get into the mid game, even with the early Gearsmith Prodigy.
We've got a 2-2 and a 1-2 facing down two of these 2-2s with Vigilance. Sam does play out his fourth land, then pass back the turn. He is sitting on some counter magic. So we're going to see the attack from John with these two knights that are Vigilant. They are 2 power, and it's going to be a trade the Exclusion Mage for the creature, not the token. And that could have some implications. Because
yeah, we've seen that play a few times before, right? There's a couple reasons. Number one, you don't want your opponent to return their own Gallant Cavalry to their hand with something like Disperse. Number two, if you're going to use your own Disperse, you'd much rather bounce their token.
And we did see that from Sam Black dispersing the other token. Now it is a Loxodon Linebreaker on the battlefield for John Walski. It's attacking in for 3. No interaction yet from Sam stopping it. That Gearsmith Prodigy remains on the battlefield, and an Omen Speaker is going to be cast.
Yeah, and Sam basically only has cancels, but John plays something that is too bad for Sam to even want to cancel. So Sam, you can tell by his body language, a little frustrated by the way this is going. Just like the cards that he's drawn are not the top half of his deck. He has access to things like multiple copies of Divination, multiple Salvager of Secrets that he would love to be able to play. But instead it's just
Guardian.
kind of below par creatures.
That Guardian is going to be a 5/5. It lines up really nicely against this Loxodon Linebreaker as well as this Omen Speaker. It's going to be revitalized for John Walski, who's going to gain 3 life as well as draw a card. Back up to 20, facing down a 2/2 and a 5/5. Both of them dependent on each other to really be at their maximum.
Yeah. And, Sam is able to play a little bit more this game, right? A 5/5 creature is no joke.
Disperse is going to return that Gearsmith Guardian, and it's going to be the Linebreaker attacking in. That Gearsmith Prodigy no longer the 2/2, down to a 1/2, so not able to trade with it. 6th mana comes down, and that's going to be 5 mana. The Gearsmith Guardian coming back, but now there's the Pegasus Courser.
Yeah, but this is the key turn, right? Sam has access to 2 cancels, so Sam is just crossing his fingers that this is not the turn where John deploys something nasty.
Well, we are tapping 4 mana. It is going to be Sleep. Oh, no. Tap each creature that Sam Black controls, and they will not untap at the next step. A full attack comes in, and now the only creatures that Sam can block with next turn are the ones that he deploys right now.
Right. And he really wants to draw a land off of this. That's a nice draw. So now he has access to cancel. Still, though, he's going to take 4 this turn from Pegasus Courser and the Loxodon Linebreaker and needs to find an answer for Pegasus Courser on his next turn.
Scholar of Stars currently standing in the way. It's a 3/2, but John unable to really interact with that too well because Sam is holding up a cancel. It's a cancel, and an Arcane Encyclopedia. There's the attack in for 4 from John. And Sam, he's going to get to untap. He is going to be feeling probably the best he's felt about this board. All game, untapping with 10 power, the ability to block, but he is still at 3. He needs to find something. Invoke the Divine and is met by the Council. Mirror Image.
Wow.
Oh. So Pegasus Courser copied by the Mirror Image, and now there are 2 flying attackers. Sam Black down to 3. The Omen Speaker, the Loxodon Linebreaker. Both of these Pegasus Coursers all line up really nicely against this 3 life. John Walski might just be taking this as a clean 2-0.
Yeah, love the way John played that by leading with the Invoke the Divine. Draws out the cancel from Sam. What he really wanted to resolve was that Mirror Image to copy Pegasus Courser. Either one of those Pegasus Coursers can send Loxodon Linebreaker to the air for the last points of damage.
Sam Black does attack in, maybe hoping that John Walski will get a bit flustered and throw some creatures in front of it. He says no, takes the 8 damage, and now there's an Explosive Apparatus on the battlefield, which could take down that Loxodon Linebreaker, but there is still 3 power with flying. That's going to do it, and John Walski going to take a very clean 2 wins there. That deck was running nicely, and Sam Black really struggled with his mana, with the cards that he was drawing, just did not come together.
Yeah, what Sam would like to do is play against more of a Mark Jacobson type deck with all of the auras and the creature enhancements. Sam's deck not so good against a white or a red, kind of low to the ground, lots of 2 and 3 drops, Pegasus Coursers, Locks It On Line Breakers, that kind of grimy beatdown stuff happens to be very effective against Sam's particular strategy. Sam also in those games, again, you mentioned the mana problems game 1. Game 2, he kind of just drew the bottom half of his deck, not necessarily the best kind of cards, and it didn't work out for him.
So that is going to sum up round 13 here at Grand Prix Sacramento. I'm TJ Rogers. This is Paul Rietzel, and there's going to be more Magic round 14 coming at you right after this.